Germany flew the world's first operational jet fighter in 1944. It was faster than anything the Allies had, faster than the Spitfire, faster than the Mustang, fast enough that Allied pilots reported it as a blur, something that appeared behind them and was gone before they could react. It outclassed every piston-engined aircraft in the sky by over 100 miles per hour. It never came close to changing the outcome of the war. By the time the Me-262 reached operational squadrons, Germany had lost Romania's oil fields, lost air superiority over the Reich, and was burning synthetic fuel it could barely produce. The jet that should have rewritten the rules of aerial combat flew sorties in ones and twos. Harassed by propeller-driven fighters, it was theoretically too fast to fear, and achieved a kill ratio that its designers would have considered an embarrassment. The question is not whether the Me-262 was extraordinary. It was. The question is who made sure it arrived too late, and whether that failure was incompetence, obstruction, or something more deliberate. By 1941, the Luftwaffe knew it had a problem. Not an immediate one. Germany controlled the skies over Europe. The Battle of Britain had cost more than expected, but the Reich's air arm was intact, experienced, and operationally dominant. The problem was further out, a horizon problem. The piston engine had a ceiling. Every aeronautical engineer in every major air force understood this. The physics were not negotiable. At high speed, the propeller blade tips approached the sound barrier, and efficiency collapsed. There was a hard limit on how fast a propeller-driven aircraft could go, and every nation was approaching it. The answer was jet propulsion, and in this race, Germany was ahead. Hans von Ohain had demonstrated a working jet engine in 1937. By 1939, Heinkel had flown the HE-178, the world's first jet-powered flight, roughly 4 months before the war began. The technology existed. The industrial capacity existed. The engineers existed. What Messerschmitt's design team produced starting in 1939 was a twin-engine turbojet fighter designated the Me-262. The prototype first flew on jet power alone in July 1942. It was, by any objective measure, a revolution. The aircraft could reach 541 miles per hour in level flight. It climbed faster than anything opposing it. Its 4 30mm nose-mounted cannons could destroy a B-17 Flying Fortress in a single pass, from a distance at which the bomber's gunners could not effectively respond. The War Department received these specifications. Development continued for 2 more years before a single aircraft reached a combat squadron. That delay requires explanation. The Me-262's airframe was not the problem. Messerschmitt's team had produced a genuinely elegant design. Swept wings at 18.5 degrees, unusual for the period, chosen not for aerodynamic theory, but because moving the engines back to balance the weight shifted the center of gravity in ways the straight-wing design couldn't accommodate. The solution turned out to be prescient. Swept wings at high subsonic speeds generate less drag. The engineers stumbled onto a principle that would define jet aircraft design for the next 30 years. The cockpit was pressurized. The tricycle undercarriage was modern. The airframe was stressed for speeds that piston fighters would never reach. The engines were the problem. To understand why, start with a piston engine. A piston engine burns fuel in a contained chamber, pushes a rod, turns a crankshaft, spins a propeller. It is mechanically a reciprocating system. The turbine jet engine works differently. It compresses air continuously, mixes it with fuel, ignites it, and exhausts the result at high velocity to generate thrust directly. No pistons, no crankshaft. Pure. The Me-262 could have entered operational service in 1943. This is not speculation. It is the documented assessment of Wehrmacht General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's general of the fighter arm, who flew the aircraft in May 1944 and filed a report describing it as a technological leap that rendered everything else obsolete. He recommended immediate mass production. His recommendation was filed, reviewed, and substantially ignored for 14 months. The reasons are layered, and taken individually, each sounds almost reasonable. Together, they constitute one of the most consequential failures of institutional decision-making in the history of air power. The first layer was Hitler's intervention. In November 1943, having been briefed on the Me-262, Hitler asked a direct question: could it carry bombs? His generals told him it could not. The airframe had not been designed for bomb loads, the performance penalties would be severe, and the aircraft's value was as an interceptor. Hitler overruled them. He wanted a fast bomber, a blitz bomber, to retaliate against Allied bombing raids on German cities. He designated the Me-262 a bomber. This decision did not stop jet fighter development entirely. What it did was create a bureaucratic obstacle that consumed months of engineering time retrofitting an interceptor for a role it was poorly suited for, while the actual fighter variant weeded. The bomb attachment points were added. The aircraft's center of gravity shifted. Pilots flew combat missions in a machine configured to carry weapons it couldn't accurately deliver. The second layer was Goering. Hermann Goering, Reichsmarshal of the Luftwaffe, had built a career on claiming credit for successes and redirecting blame for failures. By 1943, the Luftwaffe was failing on every front. Goering's response was to blame his pilots, specifically to accuse fighter pilots of cowardice in the face of Allied bombing raids. Galland's requests for more Me-262s in the fighter role were processed through a command structure that viewed every such request as an implicit criticism of leadership. Institutional survival mattered more than operational requirements. The third layer was production. Germany's aircraft industry in 1944 was under systematic attack. The 8th Air Force's oil campaign, beginning in May 1944, targeted synthetic fuel plants. By late 1944, the Luftwaffe was rationing aviation fuel. Me-262s were occasionally grounded not because they were broken, but because there was nothing to put in them. The factories producing the aircraft were dispersed into forests and camouflaged workshops. The last Me-262s were abandoned on grass airfields in Bavaria in April 1945. Some were burned by their own ground crews. Some were captured intact by American forces and shipped to Wright Field in Ohio for technical evaluation. The engineers who examined them confirmed what Germany's own reports had said since 1943. The aircraft was extraordinary. The United States, the Soviet Union, and Britain all incorporated lessons from its design into their post-war jet programs. The knowledge survived. The timing did not. Here is what the Me-262 story actually is. It is not a story about a wonder weapon arriving too late. That framing lets the institutions off the hook. What it is a story about a functioning, revolutionary technology destroyed by the organizations responsible for deploying it, by a command culture that processed criticism as insubordination, by a leader who turned an interceptor into a bomber because he needed a symbol more than he needed a strategy, and by a procurement system that confused delay with deliberation. The engineers delivered. The aircraft worked. The engine problems were real but solvable, and they were being solved, incrementally, in the test reports that nobody acted on. What killed the Me-262's impact was not Allied bombing, not material